Kamande is a data scientist based in Nairobi. He most recently worked at Ajua, the integrated customer experience platform. In this role, he led a team that provided data support for various product streams and developed new products to drive consumer understanding through advanced analytics and machine learning. He has also been a data science curriculum consultant with Moringa School, where after helping develop the curriculum, he now helps to continuously improve and align to the changing Africa data science dynamics. Kamande previously worked at Nielsen as a data science associate for East Africa. He supported the data science related retail audit queries across FMCG categories. He was also part of the Data Science Global Emerging Leader Program. He holds a master's degree in statistics and a master's degree in computational intelligence from the University of Nairobi. He has published papers on understanding the consumption and viewing habits of the Kenyan consumer in locally available data in peer-reviewed journals and presented at various conferences in Africa. He's also an NPS certified and facilitates integrated CX masterclasses in Africa. Kamande will be speaking about communication in data science. Data storytelling can be posted as the last 10 feet of any data analysis and arguably the most important aspect. Your ability to break down your work articulately to various audiences who are looking for marginally or substantially differently packaged outputs for decision-making is key. This is the only true value of data analysis to your audience. Based on his experience in both B2C, agency, and internal analytics team, Kamande highlights the importance of a stakeholder audience matrix and building up from this in data storytelling for maximum data science value creation. So over to you, Kamande.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Saturday. So like Maggie said in the introduction, my name is Kamande Wambui, and a bit about me. Like she said, previously worked as a data scientist at Nielsen, Kenya, Nielsen Africa. Recently, head of data science at Ajua. Right now, I just started out as a principal analyst at Coco Networks, and that is what I do full time. But I'm also on the side a rugby analyst, a sports analyst, really, and also the co-founder of Howzy.com that you can also check out online. I'm also the co-founder of a very young boy, if that makes sense, who might be budging in any moment from now. And so if that is a bit of a disruption, kindly bear with me. I fell in love with R back and became a huge proponent and evangelist back in the year 2008 when we built our first time series, ARIMA model. That was in second year at the University of Nairobi. What we used was the NYSC data that was available on Yahoo Finance for those who've passed through the statistics department at the University of Nairobi. You remember that, especially at that point in time. And once we built our ARIMA models, we call them ARIMA PDQ models, you would not convince us that we were not going to be the next reaching the next Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And from that time, I became a huge proponent of R. When I joined my first company, which was M-Survey back then, there was no use of R at that time. And it was during that period that R was making its way, especially this part of the world, was making its way from academia into industry, if you may. But maybe it took about 3-4 years after that for it to really catch on. And I'm very happy that this community is here now. People who are practicing across different fields, different industries, and leveraging this wonderful open source software that we love very much and making very good use of it. Now that's the background. Now I'm speaking about storytelling today, and one of the stories that always comes to mind when I think about storytelling is how naive I was, the level of naivety when I joined Nielsen. This was in 2014. And Nielsen, for those who worked on the agency side or on the B2B side, understand how critical it is for your customers to actually be on board with what you're doing, especially from a methodology point of view. So I was very naive, and I thought that for as long as I'm all caught up on the theory, I've understood it, internalized it, I know what we're doing, I know how we're estimating different things, then that's all I need to do. Until you realize the importance of that particular estimation to your customers. And I remember one of the things that we're trying to estimate was the number of kiosks in Kenya. So what is the universe of kiosks in Kenya? What is the universe of small dukas, large dukas? And even more importantly, what is the universe or size, whatever you may call it, of the population of tabletops in Kenya? Tabletops are those literal tabletops made out of either plywood or carton that you find in most parts of the country, mostly selling confectionery, cigarettes, handkerchiefs, and now masks. So how many of them are there in Kenya? So you do all your analyses, you build great models for estimation around that bring both together machine learning as well as conventional sample statistics and survey design. You estimate that number, but obviously you cannot go around counting all of them. So your methodology is watertight, it's very robust, and you're sure of what you're doing until you go to the customer who's a BAT, for instance, or a Wrigley's, and you have to explain that methodology to them because it's the most important thing to one of the most important things to their sales team, because all their bonuses, their sales bonuses are paid based on how you report that data to them. And now you have to break it down all the way from the methodology you used to the accuracy to people who are not really very technical, but this is very, very important to them. And that was really my first immersion into the deep end of storytelling, because you have to take them from the universe estimation methodology into the measurement methods or approaches that you've used, and convince them that this is actually what the market looks like, and this is a number of tabletops in the country, and this is how much gum, juicy fruit, they're selling. And so over time, I became conversant with how the framing of those stories needs to look like. But even more importantly, at the back of my mind, I always know that no matter how good the analysis is, for as long as the story you're telling is not good enough, then you risk losing everything that you've worked so hard for. And that sets the stage for the next 30 or so minutes of this keynote. Inherently, we are all storytellers as human beings. They say that we are alive. We live in a network of stories, and that there is no stronger connection between people than in storytelling. One of the writers I really like, who's written Sapiens, even says that stories and gossip are the reason we are where we are. So at the end of the day, in whatever field you're working in, storytelling becomes the connection between everything very technical and that actually being impactful or making sense, and driving the value that you envision it to drive. That's the first point. Storytelling is important. So let's pack that. Second one is data science is simple in terms of how you think of the framework within which you do data analysis and data science at large. Because you're told collect your data, and that could be through surveys, through writing SQL code or whatever, and then analyze it and then present it, right? Very simple, but it's hard. All of us who've worked in this industry, who are getting into it, who've been studying it, know that it's hard because it needs you to understand the business problem and the context. Is it a product that you're trying to build? So what data do you need to collect? How does that product look like? Work with different stakeholders. If it's KPIs, then these vary across the organization. what are the most important metrics for EXCO, the executive committee, that is, what are the most important metrics for the operational teams, the functional businesses. Then you have to go and get that data. Again, that could be through surveys, or it could be through writing SQL, or even getting different spreadsheets. We have a lot of companies that still have spreadsheets as their databases, or a mixture of all that, right? Then you get into the process of cleaning and exploring. When you do that time and time again, the cliche within the industry is that 80% of the work of data science and data analysts is actually doing that. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. Then you build your dashboards, or you build your models, and then you validate them. And then there's that whole very technical cycle of figuring out what the best visualization techniques are, what the best models are. How do you present that? Is it through an open source tool? Is it through a PowerPoint like this? Is it through a BI platform? Then you deploy. And I'm obviously trivializing it, even by saying that, because of how much work, the amount of work, the insurmountable amount of work that goes into that. But all that does not really matter unless you can get the output or the result of all that toiling into being useful or valuable or being impactful, depending on what you're looking at. If it's a business scenario, operational scenario, even in not for profit organization, then impact is very, very important. Is it a product? How are you measuring the impact of that product? So you could do all that, spend days, weeks, months, even a year building something, and because of how you package it, then it ends up not becoming successful. A significant percentage of data science projects fail. Let's have a look at, let's start getting into some of the reasons why some of these solutions end up not becoming useful. They're not entirely useless, so I'll stay away from using that word, but they're not very useful. And that is what we all want to be. We want our work to be useful. The first gap that is related to storytelling is you being able to not ask, or you being unable to ask and answer the right questions. And you could be asking whatever questions you ask and answering them very well, but for as long as they're the wrong questions, then it really does not matter. There is an art and a skill to this, and I won't go into the depths of it. Socratic methods and so many other ways of you being able to frame your questions. Now, if you're not able to ask the right questions, then it means that a couple of things happen. One is that you end up using an approach that could be methodologically correct, but is answering the wrong question. Then you get into this rabbit hole or loop that you do not really want to be in, where you have to answer particular questions, spend so much time doing that, and then having to start all over again when you realize, oh snap, that was the wrong question, right? I've found myself in such scenarios, and I think to some extent, I'm guessing a lot of us have done that as we perfect our art of asking the right questions. The main thing here is, one of the things that works is do not shy away from asking as much as it's hardly possible prior to starting out whatever you're doing. So if this is something that is led by particular functions or particular people within the organization, then you want, as they are making that request or giving you these ideas about what they want, is it a model, is it a dashboard, is it a report, then you want to ask as many questions as possible and keep going back to them at that initial phase. If it's you who's driving this, so it's an innovation, for instance, that you think will be useful to the business, and then over and above doing the things that you should be doing, such as rolling out a pilot or a proof of concept, you want to ensure that you are getting as much feedback as possible from the stakeholders and the people who will actually make your innovation, your product, whatever you're doing successful. What metrics should you be looking at? Are they exhaustive? How do you calculate those metrics? How do you define success? Because you could be defining success very differently from how they're defining it. And then listen. I do not think I need to speak a lot about that. By now, all of us should know the importance of listening as data analysts because of how imperative it is to storytelling. The other thing that I found to be very useful is deciding from very early on, especially for analytics projects, on whether you want to use either the hypothetical approach or the exploratory approach. Both of them have their pros and their cons, so you have to be very clear on, have a lot of clarity on what you're looking for and what you can stand, what you can afford to lose, depending on the methodology that you use. When you go hypothetical, it means that you're limiting yourself from answering a lot of the other questions that exploration would give you answers to. And when you're doing exploration, one of the things that you lose is the component of especially time, because you end up looking at the data, slicing, dicing it, analyzing it in so many different ways because you don't have a question that you're asking. It's good for different projects where no one knows anything. So, go in there and, tell me how customers are behaving. I don't have a hypothesis about how our customers are behaving. I don't have a hypothesis about how things are changing over time around our different products, right? Then on the hypothesis side, you could say, okay, there's been a reduction in metric X because of Y. That is my hypothesis. Can you get into the data and prove it? And so when you're having this early engagement, you must be very sure that even that hypothesis is very well defined and aligned on with the different stakeholders. So that's one. I'm asking the wrong questions. The second one is weak stakeholder buy-in, which is slightly related. There's guaranteed failure, no matter how good your work is, if you do not have the right stakeholder support. We always say that, for instance, for an innovation project, find a sponsor, find someone who is higher up in the organization if you're not, or someone who's in EXCO, in the leadership team, a functional leader who's very attached to whatever you're doing to drive that for you. Functional and executive leadership must have a significant level of belief in the purpose and the value of what you're doing. And the only way you get there is by sort of creating that picture of how the results could look like. Do not, again, spring things up on them. Do not just appear and send an email, for instance, and say, oh, we found this and this and this, and this is what we're doing about it, without any context whatsoever. If it's an innovation, if it's new metrics that you're rolling out, then you're thinking of rolling out and testing, then you must think of it as a product manager, for instance. So one of the things here that I've seen work a lot is you learning from the product managers within your organizations, and also thinking of yourself as an analytics product manager, where you create roadmaps, for instance, for the work that you're doing, and help them ask them for help, because a lot of them are willing to help you. And in the very few cases when you don't have to build something together, then whatever you've learned from them is applicable into your different projects. But have that clear roadmap. At what point do you inform stakeholder A, stakeholder B, a function leader? At what point are you pushing out these different metrics? At what point do you want to test that out with a group of users if it's a product, and so on and so forth? But that ensures that there is stakeholder buy-in. If not, then you're guaranteed to fail. The last one that I think a lot about is the fact that we end up creating a lot of unnecessary complexity and complications, and those two tend to be quite different. Now, the structures and behavior of different phenomena is already complex as it is, especially in this day of interconnectedness and a lot of software driving different things and different decisions. So as an analyst, as a data scientist, it's not in your best interest whatsoever to increase the level of complexity and the level of complications within any particular project that you're working on, especially at that latter stage of communicating and storytelling and driving impact on the other downstream, right? And there are different ways you can do this. First of all, a lot of the problems we're dealing with, to be honest, they have a certain degree of complexity and complication, but they tend to be mostly either known or knowable, meaning that the cause and effect are perceivable, they're understood, they can be understood. And if not directly perceivable, then the separation is across time and space. That's one. And there are different techniques of reducing that complexity from a philosophical point of view. When you study complex systems, you could use homogenization techniques, abstraction, transformation, and so many other things that ensure that as you proceed, even if the techniques you're using are complex, then and complex within that system, because that's what they need to be, then they're not adding another layer of complexity. They're rather breaking that structure or that behavior pattern down. That's one. And downstream, when you're communicating, make sure that you make it as simple as possible and focus on the things that matter. That's one. Two, we have a tendency of using data science techniques as hammers, and every single problem that we have is a nail, especially, for instance, deep learning. It's amazing for different things, and but in a lot of problems, in many of the problems that we are working on, then we do not need to make them to use such advanced techniques just because we know them, we have the tools, and you do not need to build a GPT-3 on your next sales prediction, or a do a GPT-3 on whatever question that you've been asked by the head of operations, right? So don't make it complex by using these complex methods or complicated methods, or that are hard for people to understand, interpret, and so on. Again, ensure reproducibility. When we do not do that, then it makes it hard for us to go back and tweak things, change different things. And that's why, for instance, R is beautiful for this. And there are a lot of resources that enable you to ensure reproducibility within projects. Always remember that the measure of success is not how accurate your model is, not how sleek your dashboard is. It's on the business and operation side. So if they're not able to, the users, the end users, are not able to make decisions and get insights, or if your product is not able to meet certain metrics that the organization has put, then you're not successful, irrespective of how sleek, how elegant the underlying model or underlying analysis is. Okay, so we lay down all those different problems, and there are many. Those are just but a few that I've encountered, and the few that I think have been possible sources of friction and underperformance of different projects that I've carried out. And we can also brainstorm on a few at the end of this. So with that background, I want to share two ideas around how we ensure that we use storytelling, or we can ensure that storytelling is beneficial to us and actually is a net positive and not a net negative in terms of making our projects impactful, useful, successful, valuable. The first one is understanding the audience, and that's quite simple. But there are a couple of things that I want to share today. The first thing is, why do we communicate? So communication has different reasons. Three of them that have been shown to be very important across organizations are, direction, providing direction. An example of this could be, we need to make these additions to this dashboard, or tweak this model to do this and this and this. And this is maybe you as a leader or a manager talking to the people who work with you. You need to give them that direction, and the communication needs to have all the clarity around why are we doing that? Why is it important? And even sometimes go as far as saying, okay, I have an idea about how we should do that, or here are some ideas, rough ideas that I'm thinking about. Can you go research more, and then come back to me, and we can make those adjustments. That's one. Two, it's inform. This is when you're relaying information about different findings, different insights, and stopping at that. So it's telling, your salespeople or your head of sales, your commercial director, that we are at risk of losing 8% of our customers in the next month in the Wambui region because of the increasing levels of out of stock in the different shops. That's an example. You inform them after doing some analysis that gives you these insights. Then the last one is to persuade, where you're now going beyond just informing and telling them, and actually having a point of view yourself in terms of what should be done, and using different persuasion techniques to make them actually do something about it, not just see things in a particular way, but actually take steps towards doing something about that insight. So we've noticed that this problem, we should send personalized message to customers in the MITRE and offer 5% discounts to reduce the risk to 3% from 8%. And this is the analysis that has gone into me making that recommendation, right? And that needs to be very, very clear. Now, the preface to that is that you must be able to understand your audience and have clarity on what communication needs to go out of them. Is it direction? Is it informative, informational? Is it persuasion? All audiences that you might be communicating to are mostly similar in that one. All our minds as human beings, as I started out by saying, are story processors and not logic processors, meaning that we function better. We consume information better as stories and not as logic. That's one. Two, we respond most strongly to stories that have a sort of pattern to them. They have a general structure. The hero story, for instance, where it starts out with a conflict, and then that conflict leads into some sort of tension, and then within that tension, there are characters who are either on the good or the bad side. There's a hero, and then the hero transforms. If you look at all the movies across time, that's sort of the structure that they follow, because research has shown that that is a structure that the human mind mostly responds strongly to. So how do you tailor in your communication, your storytelling in the same way? You don't need to reinvent anything. You're just fitting in within that particular structure. That's one. All audiences that you talk to, all people will be similar in that they want to participate in stories based on a couple of things. One of them is engagement. And engagement here is not just about people paying attention. It's about them having some emotional investment that comes with that attention. So it's not just people paying attention. You want as well to evoke something out of them. That's what engagement is. and if you think it's been shown around storytelling. That's one. Two, you want to transport them. They want to feel transported. So they want to be inserted or immersed into the story. And this is not hard in a business context, especially when you know what incentives the different stakeholders have. How do you ensure that they find themselves inserted at different points of this story, so it speaks to them? That is closely related to relevance, where obviously there is a close relationship between the story and the audience. And then fourth, it's influence. So at the end of the day, it should have a certain level of influence on, shifting a belief, shifting the level of knowledge, shifting a behavior, and that is what would make an audience participate in a story and actually respond to it, right? Now, those are the similarities, whether you're within an organization or you're out there with your friends. When you're storytelling, those are the four main things that lead people to participate in different stories. Now, those are the similarities. In a business context, audiences are also quite dissimilar in some ways. One is they could either be internal or external, meaning what? One is you always have to understand. It sounds quite obvious that you have to understand whether you are within a business-to-business framework, meaning that are you an agency, if you may, or a consultant, or are you an internal analytics team where your customer is actually people within the organization? Now, once you understand that dichotomy, then it means that you're able to answer a couple of questions that directly contribute into how you package your story. What is at stake? If you are within an organization, then the stakes are maybe slightly different to some extent to if you are a consultant or if you're a B2B organization. And what is the culture? If you're within an analytics team within an organization, then you're part of that culture and you understand how the organization works, you know how you do your things, you know how to communicate, you know who to talk to. Whereas if you're a consultant or you are an agency, you work in an agency, then you must be able to immerse yourself into a different culture compared to your culture. So I've been in scenarios where, for instance, I'm working in a tech company that is very casual, very high energy, very innovative, move quickly and break things. That's sort of the ethos. But then you're working with a bank, for instance, where that is not their culture at all. Right? So meaning that how you do things, how you package them, how you communicate, it's sort of still in a slightly conservative way. How you dress when you go into meetings, how you package your presentations, for instance, is very, very different, right? Then what's the historical context of that relationship, especially if you're an agency or you're a consultant? What things have happened in the past that influence whatever story that this data is telling you or you want to tell with this piece of analysis of this data? What is the frequency? That helps you determine as well things such as the tools that you will be using for your storytelling. Are you going to use a deck? Do you just create a dashboard? If it's Exco, how does that dashboard looks like? If it's top leadership, functional leadership, how does that look like? Which brings me to the next part of that, which is, are your audience, are the bulk of your audience strategic or operational? So, and here a couple of questions that you should always ask yourself is, what are they using this data and these insights for? Are they using them to make organization-wide decisions, or are they using them to make operational interventions on different things? That informs how you package your story. Are they organizational or is it functional? So meaning that, are you just talking to the commercial team or the ops team or the customer experience team, or are you talking to someone who oversees the entire organization? Are they more concerned about the forest or the trees? Do they care about the big picture? And do they want to be immersed and for the story to mesh around the big picture, or do they want the finer details? Again, this is based on whether they're strategic or operational. How much time do they have? You have to be very clear on that, whether you're making a presentation or you're building a dashboard, whatever. How much time do they have at their disposal, depending on the level they are in within the organization. And of course, you have to ask yourself about the frequency and the tools for that you use to do that. The other one in this matrix is, I thought about packaging this in the form of a matrix, but then it would be maybe a bit complex. The other one the other question you have to ask yourself regarding your audience as you aim to understand them is, are they technical or non-technical? Meaning that how much technical information is actually useful to them, especially for those who are building models, for instance, and even dashboards to some extent, and different data analysis presentations. Do they really care about model parameters, features, or do they really care about what are you predicting, or what are the business outputs, and stop there. They trust you already that, hey, you're a data analyst, data scientist, research analyst, and you know what you're doing, just give me the results. What do they know already? Do they have the context? So if you're talking to your peers, for instance, and an example of this is if you're talking to, if you're an agency or a consultant and you're presenting this to your customers, your business customers, how much do they know already? Are you talking to the head of a department that is very technical, so the head of data on the other side, or are you talking to the head of marketing, for instance, right? They have different skill sets and they have different things that they care about. Has any work been done previously that informs, for instance, if you're talking to technical people, how much, for lack of a better word, citations or literature review you have to show them that this methodology has been used here and here and here, and this is why we chose it. And then breaking that down into this is how we implemented it, this is the method, this is the approach. Or if they're not technical, then this is how you use this output. This is how you use this product, and this is how you use this dashboard, without caring about all the work that went behind, combining the different tables or whatever sort of computations you did on the back end, if it was data that was collected from the field. That is something that you have to always consider. That's the first idea. So take a note of those different ways of breaking down the audience and why it is important, such an important input into how you tell your story. That's the first idea. The second idea is, once you've established that, how do you reduce the cognitive load? Human beings, by and large, again, they like stories because they're conceptually easier to process than logic. And so you always want to play into that, make it easy for your audience to process whatever you're telling them, or even not process at all, because the story is very well structured and plays into what is inherent to them. Now, stories are obviously more impactful and powerful than statistics because, like I said, they take less effort of the brain to contextualize a lot of complex issues. Okay, now I know you're asking yourself, we are at Saturday, and have not talked about R, at least from a technical point of view, and this is where it comes in. Obviously, this is a recommended tidy approach of doing data science. So I'm not going to focus on everything else. We have the entire day to do that. I'll just focus on the last end, which is communication. And I'm going to sort of go through a use case of how we can reduce complexity within one of the things I like doing a lot, which is sports analytics. For those who are either fans of rugby or have watched a rugby match, then work with me. If not, then just focus on the visualizations and not the data itself or the ideas. All right. So when one of the things that we do when looking at rugby statistics, for instance, or whatever statistics you're looking at around sports, it's how much high intensity distance is covered by different positions within the team. And the underlying idea is the foundational concept is that different players have different skills, different levels of fitness, and they have different responsibilities on the pitch. So we have what you call your backs and your forwards. So if you throw that data of high intensity distance into a GG plot, then this is sort of what you get in the basics. But there are a couple of things that are happening here. One is, and I'd hope that if this was a live conference, maybe a physical conference, I'd go around asking a few questions, but right now I'll just go ahead and share my thoughts with you.
Sorry, Kamande.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but
yes.
we are pressed for time, so
yes.
we request you to be finalizing.
Wrap. Yes, I'll be finalizing.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Maggie. And so you notice here that there's a lot of color. That's one. Color is distracting. Our brains obviously are not very good at attending to color, especially when it's a lot of colors. So one of the things that I'd say we do is, okay, let's start removing a bit of the background, for instance, and add some of the basics. What are we looking at? What's the title? What's the subtitle? What are we actually measuring here? And as opposed to looking at group, what is a group? Now we're looking at position. Let's even go one step further and clean that up even a bit more. Let's remove all the color, leave it at gray, and just leave in the outliers. Now we are able to see, okay, we're looking at the high intensity distance, where the distance covered is where high intensity is defined as the distance covered at more than 18 kilometers per hour. There seems to be a lot of homogeneity around the forwards, but there are three outliers on the backs. One is extremely good, the other one, and there are two who are not really covering a lot of high intensity distance. We can even go a step further and add some annotations to those outliers. So the first one is number 13, and that's how much distance they covered. The other one is number 11 and number 14, and that's how much distance they covered, which is like significantly lower than number 13. Now, as the person you're talking to, who's the coach, or even the players themselves, who are not very technical, then it's very easy for them to consume this and say that, hey, if our expectation for you is number 11, 14 is to cover this much high intensity distance because it has a correlation to winning, or it's a significant driver of us winning or losing matches, especially on offense, then you're not doing very well, right? For other parts of the organization, if it's the management team, then this is what they need to see as well. Again, let's keep it as gray as possible and avoid color as we tell the story, because that's distracting. Only use color when you need to categorize something that needs to stand out, because that's where the human eye will always go, right? The other idea is around, we have a certain, we have an urge every now and then to use tables to present information. And there's not much that you can infer from this, whether you're technical or not. If you maybe slightly technical, you know how to read tables at a detail level. Maybe if you're an accountant who spends all their time looking at spreadsheets, then you can tease out some patterns from this. And so cognitively, this is a lot of load for anyone who's processing that. Whereas you could just, for instance, do this and keep everything at gray and say, okay, what are we trying to show here? We're trying to show the correlation for every single position between the heart rate variability and the high intensity distance covered. Ideally, those two should have a positive correlation. When people do a lot of high intensity distance, you do not want their heart rate variability, which is a key measure of performance, cardiovascular performance, to go down in any way. So how about you do that, for instance? And I've spoken a lot about these ideas in terms of how we use color, size, orientation, the shapes, the intensity, the hue, in terms of letting and making presentations and visualizations work for us in storytelling. But in the interest of time, I will leave it at that. So as we wind up, a recap is: one, storytelling, always remember, is an inherent human inclination. Make every single communication presentation a story. Optimize on not just the data, but the insights and the narrative. Those must always go hand in hand. You must always begin by understanding the context, where the context is a combination of the audience and their expectations and their relevance, and how you bring them into the story. Always reduce the cognitive load that you're putting on your audience by ensuring that you're cleaning up your visualizations as much as possible, and using all these different techniques that optimize on the use of hue, intensity, etc. A rule of thumb for me is always start gray and then build up from there. And then the last one is let's all reduce on the use of pie charts as much as possible. And yeah, we can meet outside and debate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the insightful talk, Kamande. So I'll allow you 1 minute to answer 2 questions, and then we can close this. So one question is: have you found yourself in a position where you need to educate your audience to get to the point where you can engage with them over your results? Any tips?
Yes, any tips? One is if the audience is maybe fairly non-technical, then you can spend a bit of time educating them. FAQs work perfectly. Send some pre-reads, especially before presentation, if that's what you're going to do, and tell them that, hey, this is what we'll be talking about during this meeting, and here is the background information, or here is a pre-read of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions between now and the meeting, so that by the time we're starting this discussion, we are all on the same page. Yeah, those are some of the things that I found to work. If it's a dashboard, for instance, that has a fairly detailed or potentially complex data set or data visualizations, then make sure that you have notes that accompany that. And it's very clear that this is the idea we're trying to communicate, and this is how we arrived at that particular idea.
Okay, thank you for that. And the last question is: what is one thing you do differently if you were given a chance to start the data science journey all over again?
Mine has been a very boring route to data science because it was mostly academic, and I've had the lack of going from school studying statistics and computational intelligence into industry, and all that has come together quite well. I'd say the one thing I do though is sort of back in maybe undergrad, I'd have spent a bit more time programming, not just on art, but trying other tools as well. And that's something that I always tell to other students who come to me for advice, and the people I mentor, that you have a lot of time on your hands in school. Try out different things and develop your capacity to learn different tools, different techniques, and different ideas as much as possible.
Thanks for that. So so that's it. Just a confirmation: EXCO means executive committee, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's it. Thank you so much, Kamande. Thank you so much.